When I first met Elisa Justice, one of the first things that I noticed is that she emanates joy. Beneath that joy and Elisa's sometimes wicked sense of humor, there is a steely resolve to protect her son. I recognize it because those of us who have loved ones that have a fragile grasp on their health have that same determination. What Elisa wants, needs, begs, and sometimes demands of us is a partnership that not only enhances life, but also can save it. It's here at Methodist that Elisa found people who will partner with her and her son. So next up is Elisa Justice with her story of appreciation and gratitude for what you do. Elisa?
I'm really embarrassed now.
No.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. I'm very honored to be with you today. I'm going to begin by telling you about our first experience with Methodist University Hospital. And I can honestly tell you with all my heart and with all my soul that by the time we had arrived at Methodist University, I already knew my son was going to live. We'd already transferred from 2 other hospitals, and Methodist University was our 3rd hospital in 3 days, and it was Christmas Eve. The we that I'm referring to is myself, a single mother of a young man with special needs. He's an amazing young man. There's pictures. And Carl has cerebral palsy. He's a spastic quad, nonverbal, and he has some complicated health issues. But yet he's a 3.23 GPA in college. Thank you. Thank you. Carl's been a handful since before he was born. I was very ill when I was pregnant with him. I was put in the hospital at 23 weeks with preeclampsia until Carl was born at 32 weeks. Carl had his first brain surgery when he was 37 days old. In 3 months, he had a shunt revision. Carl has had more surgeries and more procedures than I can even count. So I know how important doctors and the nurses are who care for him. And I also know how important the others who make up the team are. That's why when a trusted doctor said, go to Methodist University that night, that's where we headed on Christmas Eve that I was telling you about. On that morning, our transfer to Methodist University, Carl was very ill. He was septic and had just awoken from a coma. I was at my wit's end about what to do, but thankfully I had spoken with one of Carl's physicians, and he told me, transfer Carl to Methodist University. As I was driving to Methodist, I was not only lost, completely lost, I was afraid and I was praying. I was asking, Heavenly Father, please tell me, am I making the right decisions for my son? This was our first experience with an adult hospital. Carl had just become of legal age, and we could no longer use the children's hospitals. When it's your child, no matter what age, fear and the unknown can overwhelm you. All I could think about was, is my son going to live? Are they going to allow me to stay with him in ICU? And as soon as I arrived, the paramedics was there, and they said, here's Mom. Then a stern but kind neuro ICU nurse, if any of y'all know those, she was checking all of Carl's lines and his hookups, and all the while she was listening to the paramedics. She was checking on Carl, and she was, listening to the paramedics. This stern nurse informed me that she had to do an evaluation on my son, but I'd have to go in the hallway. And while she was to do that, she would let me know as soon as she finished, but it shouldn't be but a few minutes. I could visually see Carl. I was staring through the little window in the doorway. And so after evaluation, she came and got me, and she's taking me back to my son. This stern little nurse, she comes up, and she pulled up a chair by the bed, and she said, Mom, this is your chair. I said, thank you. She explained everything to me thoroughly about what they were going to do for my son. After she had finished talking, I asked her, when are visiting hours? This young nurse looked at me, and she was rather shocked. She said, visiting hours? But, she reached across the bed, and she touched my arm. And she said, Mom, this is your chair. you can stay with your baby as long as he's here. You don't have to leave him. That was several years ago. Methodist had just started the enhanced family practice presence at bedside. Excuse me. From a family member's perspective, I can tell you I'm so grateful that we're now encouraged to be at the bedside. Previously, when Carl had been admitted into ICUs, I was only allowed to be with him in a few minutes at a time. My heart and arms would ache to see him, to touch him, to be there for him. A mother, no matter what the age of the child, not only wants, but needs to comfort her child. Often, fathers and daughters and sons, sisters, best friends want to support and comfort their sick loved ones. And you make that possible. Methodist University Hospital makes this possible through your patient-centered policies. When I was told I'd be able to stay by my son's bed, I gave praise to Heavenly Father first for such an amazing hospital like Methodist University, providing patients and families an environment for positive healing. I can honestly tell you, I saw the heavens open up and angels were singing. My mouth flew open, my eyes filled with tears, and that ache in my chest that had been there for days, that I didn't know what was going on, I finally took my first deep breath in days. While looking back and forth to the nurse, my son, someone said, "It's snowing." This stern but kind nurse, she reached over, she opened up the curtain, and she turned Carl's head. He was so sick he couldn't hardly turn his head. She turned his head and she's run her fingers through his hair. She said, "Look, Carl, it's snowing on Christmas Eve." Not only did I know that my son was going to live, I knew that he had angels caring for him. During our ICU stay, not only did they allow us to put up a tiny Christmas tree on his bedside, no lights, of course. One of the precious nurses had gone home on Christmas Eve and made Carl a scarf with his name on it. She'd embroidered a scarf for him. She brought it to him and gave it to him on Christmas Day. These nurses showed so much kindness and care out of their way to my son, I can't even put it into words. Also, one thing I like to say is during our ICU stay, I was encouraged by a resident. I was encouraged to ask questions and that I should encourage all the doctors to share all information with each other as well as myself. By the time we transferred to the floor, the doctors and the ICU nurses had made me feel safe enough to know I could safely take my son home and care for him by myself. Not only did the doctors and nurses of Methodist University save my son's life, they kept me informed of everything. And I'd like to express my appreciation to Methodist for your commitment to information sharing, your commitment to communication. You see, as a single mother with no family support, I'm the one who has to make the critical decisions about Carl's medical care. It's an enormous responsibility, and that's why I ask doctors and others, please teach me. Help me, show me, help me understand. It's that partnership with medical professionals that enables me to make the best decisions for my son. I know my son better than anyone. I'm the expert on Carl. You are the expert in medical care. His care works best when we work together. After we transferred to the floor for the neuro-ICU nurse, I came to myself a little bit, and I realized that one of the doctors that had been treating Carl had the same last name as one of the doctors that had delivered my son. I asked this doctor about this, and he informed me that, in fact, that man that delivered Carl was his uncle. You see, the doctor that delivered Carl had huge hands. Huge. And the first time I saw him, I thought to myself, oh, God, please don't let this man deliver my baby. Oh, Lord. So during the C-section, I couldn't see the doctors because there was a sheet up and I had an epidural, so there wasn't any pain. But take my word for this and listen, listen, listen. Obstetricians should not have big hands. The doctor and I had some comical exchanges in the delivery room to the point that everyone was laughing. No one could stop laughing. He finally looks over and he says, "Mother, you just lay there and rest. I'm doing the best I can to hurry up." By that time that I'd finished telling the university doctor about this, he was rolling laughing also. And it was so calming to have a doctor take the time to hear a story from the past, to laugh, to listen. Here was a doctor that didn't seem to rush, and he would even listen to an old, tired mother's story. Another one of the admitting doctors. He was a man that if you ever saw him, you'd think just like I did. You would say, "Oh my gosh, I know he has to be on the Andy Griffith show." This doctor looked so sweet and so kind, but one of the things I noticed about him when he would visit my son was he would always walk in and he would gently rub Carl's arm. He'd lean over and speak to him first. He was acknowledging Carl's presence. He was comforting Carl at the same time. And as a parent of a special needs child, I've noticed at times that folks don't always know what to do with someone with special needs. So to see a doctor walk in and touch him and speak to him made me know right away, yep, he's from Mayberry. He's a good man. I asked this doctor as he was discharging us, "When is Carl going to be completely well? What do I need to see?" And this was one of the most comforting, discharging words I've ever heard. He says, "When the weather gets warm." And I was like, okay. But I'll have you know, on the first warm day, I could see a totally different person. He was right. Just something as simple as telling me when the weather gets warm not only gave me something to look forward to, strive for, it gave me hope. And so, educating families and information sharing is one of the key ingredients to a positive attitude of healing for patients and for understanding for families. I sincerely hope you will take what I tell you to heart when I say, please listen to the patients and families. Remember how important two-way communication is. Put things in simple terms, because you don't know how long they've not had sleep. So the first time a nurse told me that Carl had extubated himself, I thought, oh my gosh, what has he done to himself? I didn't understand. I had no idea he had pulled the tube out of his throat. And please remember the weight of your words. The times that doctors or nurses have given me a little hope, it has stayed with me here and here. I remember all of these times. I remember every one of them. I want to read to you a quote by President Dieter F. Uchtdorf, second counselor in the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Quote, "Some years ago, in a meeting house in Darmstadt, Germany, a group of brethren were asked to move a grand piano from the chapel to the adjoining cultural hall, where it was needed for a musical event. None were professional movers, and the task of getting that gravity-friendly instrument through the chapel and into the cultural hall seemed nearly impossible. Everybody knew that this task required not only physical strength, but also careful coordination. There were plenty of ideas, and not one could keep this piano balanced correctly. They repositioned the brethren by strength, by height, and age over and over again. Nothing worked. As they stood around the piano, uncertain about what to do, a good friend of mine, Brother Hanal Lushton, spoke up, and he said, 'Brethren, stand close together and lift where you stand.' It seemed too simple. Nevertheless, each lifted where he stood, and the piano rose from the ground and moved into the cultural hall as if on its own power. That was the answer to the challenge. They merely needed to stand close together and lift where they stood." End quote. So today, like President Uchtdorf has suggested, everyone has a unique place and an important task that only you can perform. So lift where you stand. Thank you.